When I think of Twilight, I think of a lot of untapped potential. I think of the multiple storylines and subplots that could easily be created out of such an interesting backlore of different characters, factions and histories that surround this universe. This potential, however, is completely overshadowed by Bella and Edward's romance, and it really sucks out the overall essence of what I feel Twilight is, or at least could be. And I know I'm not the only one who got so fed up of the entire story being about Edward's intense love for Bella, Bella's awkwardness, half of New Moon being about Bella's intense heartache, half of Breaking Dawn being about a wedding and living on an island, and a full damn movie dedicated to a wedding and living on an island. It just missed out on so many opportunities to develop the actual vampire world. So, for today's video, I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to highlight how this seriously intense romance ruined Twilight and what could have actually been done to make it much better. And I'll go one further and tell you how I could fix it. So, let's get into it. At the heart of Twilight lies the often melodramatic love story of Edward Cullen and Bella Swan. While it's okay for such a love story to draw the readers in to the universe, with Edward struggling to deal with Bella's scent and fighting temptations that he hasn't felt in a very long time, it soon becomes a constraint. For me, it overindulges in their relationship far too quickly, and it becomes very apparent that although we'll see supporting characters, we're not exactly going to see supporting subplots. This really detracts from a more nuanced storytelling. As the series progressed, the narrative revolving around Edward and Bella began to exhibit a pattern of repetition. The cycle of attraction, danger and resolution became a recurring theme, with each installment revisiting these elements with little variation. This repetitive nature not only made the plot predictable, but also took away from the freshness and excitement that the initial book offered. The constant focus on their relationship dynamics, such as Edward's overprotectiveness and Bella's willingness to risk everything for love, often overshadowed other potentially engaging plot developments. For example, in the first book, Bella goes to meet James in what appears to be a self-sacrifice. In New Moon, she's offering herself to Volturi to be killed in exchange to save Edward. In Eclipse, she cuts her arm in order to distract Victoria and Riley, knowing at least one of them will most likely kill her. It's just a rinse and repeat kind of cycle, and it's boring. So this kind of perception influenced the series' overall legacy, potentially narrowing its appeal and overshadowing the richer, more diverse world that Meyer had created. The saga became a story known more for its portrayal of an all-consuming teenage romance rather than a multi-faced tale set in a complex, supernatural world, and for me, personally, it's frustrating. Yes, I used the book name in this second point, but that's exactly the descriptive term needed to highlight the lack of focus on such impressive characters that are so underdeveloped and have such interesting backstories. Alice Cullen, for example, with her precognitive powers and mysterious past involving being institutionalized and then transformed into a vampire to escape death, had a backstory ripe for exploration. Her ability to see the future and her cheerful disposition of her dark past could have provided a compelling narrative, delving into themes of fate versus free will, for example. Her history with James could have been a book by itself, even worth a couple of chapters at least. Or Carlisle Cullen's origin story, how he became a vampire, how he learned to control himself around bloodlust as if it was just water before him, how he joined and, more importantly, successfully departed the Volturi is a story I would have loved to see some expansion on. Or what about the fact that Jacob Black is more of a plot device than an actual character, literally created for a love triangle and placed more focus on Bella and Edward, whereas in reality, Jacob's journey as a young boy who triggers his shape-shifting gene and learns how to deal with it is really intriguing. This boy who joins a pack before his own alpha traits emerge and he breaks out on his own, something never seen amongst the Quillette. What a story that must be, what potential development that has. And speaking of his pack, what about Leah Clearwater, the first female shapeshifter in centuries? then of course we probably have the most interesting, history-steeped, knowledge-filled vampires in the whole series, the Volturi. These guys could get a book written about themselves alone with ease. I would pay for that. I'd pay to see a Volturi movie, and I'd watch a Volturi series or show. Aro, Caius and Marcus have centuries of history and political intrigue that could have been explored. Their governance over the vampire world, their moral ambiguities of their actions, and their complex relationships with each other and the rest of the supernatural world offer a wealth of untapped storytelling. The history of the war with the Romanians, the tale of how Aro killed his own sister to prevent Marcus from leaving. It's just incredible how much there is in this universe, and it's all overshadowed by Bella and Edward's teenage bubblegum romance. The dynamic of Edward and Bella's relationship heavily contributes to the drawn-out Twilight story, as it becomes solely focused on the two. It has an imbalanced power structure, overprotectiveness bordering on control, and an overarching theme of obsession and dependency. Edward's behaviour towards Bella often crosses the line from caring to controlling. For instance, he watches her sleep without her knowledge and at times dictates her interactions with others like Jacob. This overprotectiveness, while portrayed as a sign of love, mirrors behaviours often seen in unhealthy relationships, especially in today's times where things like this are more open. It's not uncommon to see older franchises revisited and the unhealthy relationships criticised. Edward often takes on a paternalistic role in Bella's life, making decisions for her own good. He uses the excuse of having a lot more life experience, wisdom and knowledge than Bella does, and believes he has better judgment than her. Then on the other hand, we have Bella's heavy dependency on Edward, where she would literally abandon everything just to be with him. I said in the beginning of this video, she spends half of New Moon in the depressive heartache over losing Edward, having nightmares, hallucinations. It's as if her life has just ended because she no longer has him. This also really hinders her development as a character, despite being the prime focus of the story. Her character is wholly defined by her relationship and nothing more, which is really frustrating to read and to watch on screen. She finally starts to rebuild herself and build a beautiful connection with Jacob, even though part of that is reason for her to be able to get over Edward. However, as soon as there is the slightest chance of seeing Edward again, she absolutely drops everything, even Jacob's heart, to go be with him. So how do we fix such an issue? How do we fix everything? How do we address the overshadowing and basically spotlight hogging by the dreary yet intense romance of Edward and Bella? Well, instead of centering almost exclusively on Edward and Bella, the narrative could be rebalanced to give equal importance to other characters and plot lines. This would involve expanding the roles and backstories of secondary characters, allowing them to have their own arcs and moments in the spotlight. By doing so, the story would offer a richer and more diverse perspective on the Twilight universe itself. I've mentioned in part 2 that characters such as Alice Cullen, Jacob Black and members of the Volturi hold significant potential for deeper exploration. Let's have dedicated chapters or sections of the book that delve into their histories and perspectives, offering new insights and adding layers to the overall narrative. If we take Harry Potter for example, there's a huge part dedicated to Voldemort's past, where he came from, what happened to him, why he did what he did, when he killed his father, when he killed his grandparents. It's all there, and it draws interest to the character in the same way we're drawn to Harry's own past. It's brilliant writing. Adding such interesting subplots to the Twilight story would provide a much needed break from the central romance of Bella and Edward. And speaking of the romance, we don't really have to change the intensity, but it can be reframed in the sense of Bella not being so submissive to Edward's dominance over her. It will be interesting to see her have a little more of a backbone in challenging Edward, which displays a more healthy dynamic to the relationship. From a personal perspective, I feel it's natural for one person in a relationship to assert dominance, even if it's not intentional. It could be just a person's personality, but challenging their decisions can make them rethink how they actually behave, which could have given things a more equal perspective. we have to also focus on expanding the lore and the world building of Twilight, because this could completely captivate readers interested in more than just a romantic aspect, which, as we know, a lot of us are, I am for sure. This could include detailed descriptions of vampire history, like where and how vampirism originated, like that wasn't even remotely looked at, nothing. We can look at werewolf mythology and the coexistence of supernatural beings with humans. This could literally take the story to a different level. Such world building would provide a more immersive and comprehensive understanding of the series' setting. I hope they expand upon this in some way when they release the TV series. If Stephenie Meyer did these things, it most certainly would have offered a multi-dimensional approach to the story, received less criticism, and probably left a more diverse legacy.